and I are longtime friends. We work together at Laurier, and she's very excited to present, and I'm very interested in learning. So, Alicia, I will let you have the floor, take the stage, but thank you for your time and thank you for everyone who is joining us today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Haley. And we are just reconnecting and sharing that it's so lovely in the world of student affairs and services across Canada to always kind of like find those links amongst folks who have worked together and all that good stuff. So, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I just had to double check the clock that it has moved from the morning where I am, which is in the University of Toronto, Mississauga. My name is Alicia Ferguson. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm very excited to be here today and very appreciative of being asked to share this information. I will be honest and transparent that this was a presentation that I did alongside a colleague, Gilbert Lynn, who's currently just on a leave. So I was asked if we would be interested in presenting the content again because we had the fortune of presenting at Caucus last year, or I guess this year in June. And so really enjoyed being able to share that content with those who were able to make it to the session in person. But as we all know, it's often really nice to be able to share information multiple times, build on the information, share updates on the information, but also for new audiences and being able to ensure that it's accessible. So I absolutely love being at a virtual conference. I think it's fantastic for us to be able to gather this way. And just wanted to thank everybody for coming to the session today. I will admit with presenting online, it's sometimes hard to read the chat and see hands up and all that good stuff. So I will ask Haley to kind of jump in if there's a little bit of chaos happening. No one can hear me, or I'm talking too fast, or people have burning questions that I just haven't gotten to and I've been jumping around. So more than happy to have this be an engaging session, but also to share the information with you today. So as Haley said, the name of the session is How to Train 350 Student Staff Online. It was a play on words with How to Train Your Dragon. And to be honest, I've never seen the movie, but the newest movie did come out, and I heard that it is legendary. But it just felt succinct with the fact that when we take on training student staff on a yearly basis, though it can be kind of a standard practice in student engagement and student services. But it also can feel like each year you're trying to kind of like survive. It's like, oh my gosh, we're doing this again. There's so much to it. We have more students coming, our students coming in with the same skill set as last year's, et cetera, et cetera. And so the focus of today is sharing with everybody a training model that we developed that was a department model to ensure that our student staff who work in student engagement services here at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, were able to get the core training that is needed for them to all do their jobs. And so to share with you today what we're going to be talking about, I'm going to share a little bit about the University of Toronto, Mississauga, the history of student training here at our units, the creation of Nexus, which is what the focus of today is, and what we have kind of named the training content that exists that's online, why and how it was formed, the 3-year strategic plan that we are just wrapping up, and then how we've integrated interns from the OIZ Masters of Education program, and then from a partner's perspective, which is what Gilbert typically provides. So I will be able to share a little bit about what it was like for the International Education Center as a partner to be involved in this. And then ultimately continuous improvement, the lessons we've learned, our next steps, and then key takeaways that I think are relevant for anyone who's at this session. One of the most important things I often think is, what do you actually leave the session with? To just hear one another talk about things isn't always beneficial if we don't think that it can be applied to another campus, etc. So next slide, please. So setting the context, as I shared, next slide. The University of Toronto, Mississauga is the second largest division at the University of Toronto. For anyone who's familiar with the campus, we are kind of a division under the entire U of T umbrella. And therefore, we do have areas where we have tri-campus relationships and policies and procedures, etc. But we also do have many student services and most of our student services here in-house for our students. We have 15,200 plus I think we're around that same number this year of undergraduate students and 900 graduate students. There's 18 academic units. And the percentage of our international population is interesting at 24%, with representation of students from 170 different countries and regions around the world. And therefore, that just makes up the kind of experience of our students, and the fact that them being able to be employed at the University of Toronto Mississauga, especially under the student engagement umbrella, is a high priority for a lot of students, and is a high priority of our departments, is ensuring that we engage with students, both because we are passionate about having the student voice and student leadership in our departments, but also knowing the importance of especially international students being able to get work experience while studying here in Mississauga and in Canada. Next slide, please. This is just a slide to let folks know kind of the makeup of what we're talking about here. So Student Affairs and Services as a division within the University of Toronto Mississauga then has an assistant dean, that is the assistant dean of student experience, with three departments under that portfolio, which are the Center for Student Engagement, which is the department I work for, the International Education Center, and then Student Housing and Residence Life. I should have said in my opening, and I apologize, I am the Assistant Director of Campus and Community Engagement at the Center for Student Engagement, but what I do for Nexus is I kind of wear a different hat, where I am actually responsible for the strategic plan of Nexus, the implementation of Nexus, and ensuring that the committee is exploring what Nexus is, not on behalf of the Center for Student Engagement. So I will get more into that later, but realize that I never introduced my actual job title. Next slide, please. And so the history of student leader training was that we all had three separate departments. Typically in August, we all had our week-long, and student housing had a 2-week-long training, which took place separately. It was sometimes 30 hours, sometimes more, and we were all working on this separately. We were sometimes having students who worked for multiple departments, and they were trying to figure out what sessions they needed to go to, etc. And then also we were tapping the same on-campus partners to help us with that content. Each department was then therefore working with these departments, if we want to keep clicking through there. So they were tapping on the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Office, the Indigenous Initiatives Office, Sexual Violence Prevention and Support Office, and the International Education Center. And so ultimately these partners were stressed. I mean, I also acknowledge to all of them that typically August is also a lovely time to take vacation right before a new academic year. And so a lot of these partners were having to kind of plan ahead and be like, oh, we also have to be kind of around when these departments are doing their training, which is before the academic term starts, before orientation starts. Like, that's not an ideal time. How do we actually schedule with our smaller teams? Unfortunately, these areas of departments are responsible for not just students and their experiences around these topics, but also staff and faculty and librarians here at UTM. And so a lot of them were small teams, which is not great for them, but also the fact that we're asking them to come out and do these 2, 3, 4-hour trainings over and over to multiple departments was not great. And then, oh, sorry, if we could go back. Sorry. And then, oh yeah, okay, I did say all that. Thank you. So the creation of Nexus, and we can go to the next slide here. We ultimately had conversations with leadership. We were all kind of meeting informally and saying like, well, when are you doing your equity, diversity, and inclusion training? Okay, we'll do it on a different day. And we were just kind of working in that way. It was like siloed collaboration, if that makes sense. And so senior leadership kind of recognized that them overseeing all three of these departments and hearing all these issues from their skip meetings, they were saying, okay, yeah, something's not working here. We need to fix this. we need to come up with something new. So they came up with the idea of let's have one representative from each department, ideally someone who is involved in the training committee that exists in those individual offices, because they would just have more touch points with scheduling or what are the learning outcomes that you'd hope exist for training, and just more of an insight on that. And then no additional side committees around what Nexus would be about. So no looking at assessment, no talking about tech. It was very much a just one representative from each department, prioritizing and ensuring that we had funding that's available for interns. And that's because of the fact that ultimately all these folks who are sitting kind of at this table, this would be an additional, and we probably all know from sitting on committees, it ends up being additional work that comes out of it. And we knew that it was going to be a lot of work to build this thing. So we recognized that having any of us kind of do it at the side of our desk would not work because we have so much responsibility for our own department. And so having an intern was a critical part of making sure this was successful. And then one leader who was responsible for the strategy, going to any leadership meetings to check in, and able to represent Nexus versus their own individual department. That has been me in this role for the last 3 years. And so that's why I was excited to be able to present this information to you. But right now we are succession planning to figure out kind of how to have a new leader in this role, just knowing that different strategies, different future direction, and also just ensuring that different people have the opportunity to do this type of work is really, really valuable, especially for folks who are interested in being leaders in our field, but also being able to work with those on-campus partners and supervising an intern is a really cool opportunity. So really, really enjoyed it, but I will be stepping back from the role by next year. Yeah, so one of the things that we realized was a big part of this was we want it to be online. We wanted to make sure that we're not asking these partners to still come in every single year and deliver content and update the content and come up with new content and make the session really engaging. We wanted it to be that it's online. And that would allow those partners to not have to be physically in attendance to do the training. It would give us more of a this is the training, and it's kind of more of a core asynchronous module versus folks actually having to live present it. And so we launched the committee in the first year in October 2022. And yeah, as I said before, we are just wrapping up our third year this year. Next slide, please. So the 3-year strategic plan in year one, obviously it was the first year, we'd never done anything like this. And so we said, we need to start with the basics. We need to acknowledge that even if student staff have worked for any of us before, they may have done any sort of trainings before, we are starting everybody at new student training. And so we started with an introduction to the student engagement department so that folks can learn about those departments. And then there was 4 core asynchronous trainings that were built. We used the software, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the software. I will think of it eventually, but we basically used Articulate, that's the name of the software, to build these asynchronous modules, and it allowed us to ensure that all the content that these partners had created, especially during COVID, because they did do a lot of PowerPoint trainings and a lot of recorded trainings, and so we're able to build a lot of the asynchronous content from past trainings. But our intern and myself in the leadership role worked very closely with these partners to ensure that their voices and their expertise is what the trainings are about. We were not weighing in on what we think should be in the trainings. We were very much relying on them as the subject matter experts to be able to share the information that they feel and know is relevant to student development and student leaders who are working with peers, etc. And then we had a resource library. And the reason we did that was we just acknowledged that there's a lot more content that student leaders need to and like to know. And there's a lot of departments that we wanted to introduce them to. And we knew that each department does have their own trainings that may have additional things that come about in those trainings, but that this could be kind of a space that students could come and log into at any time. So let's say that when they're actually in their role, And September is very different than January in the ways that they're supporting their peers or running programming. They could always come back and access the content whenever they wanted if a resource would be more relevant later. So that was year one. Year two was when we launched the returner stream. And our vision with this was that we were acknowledging that many of our student leaders end up working in multiple departments, or we even joke that some students say that they would love to do the trifecta, where they get to work for the Center for Student Engagement, Student Housing and Residence Life, and the International Education Center. And so kind of that joke and even just our own data of knowing how many students work for our departments, we wanted to ensure that each year they weren't just doing the same trainings over and over, because for us, from a actual like assessment slash data and ensuring that they're completing the trainings, we needed them to do something every year. We needed to kind of say, yes, they've all done X training every single year, because we don't necessarily know exactly what they're coming into the roles on. And there's a lot of requirements of these roles and core kind of trainings that they need to do. And so again, we worked with our intern, we worked with all these partners, and we developed content that kind of fed off year one and the new student training, so that the students could kind of have a refresh, but also build on that knowledge and ensure that they also had space to kind of reflect on, I've done this job and this information was relevant at this time, and now I'm going into this new job and I'm kind of thinking about that. And that was the cool part about the Articulate software, is it does allow you to create knowledge uh, kind of explanations and gaming and gamification a little bit of the knowledge, but also spaces for reflection, spaces for assignments, spaces for students to kind of like check in on their learning. And we often say that students, as I said before, can go back and redo the trainings if they want to, or a supervisor could kind of mandate that someone goes back and does the training if they felt like someone kind of didn't engage in the content as they should have. Year three is when, and this was this past year, we developed a post-training PD strategy. And what that was is it allowed students to go through the training, go through their own department training, and then kind of a few weeks later be touched or be encouraged to go back into the Quarkus shell, and be able to think about where they want to develop their learning. What sort of things do they want to additionally do? And the way that we did that was we worked with all of our partners who were listed in running those modules, and basically just asked them, what sort of events or programs do you run during the year that students would be able to attend to build on the learning that they would have had in the asynchronous content? All the partners were thrilled. It kind of felt like a best case scenario, because we were basically saying, this is us advertising the things that you're already running and encouraging student leaders to attend them, and then come back and reflect on what those experiences were and what they learned and how they built on the asynchronous content and then learned more things. And so we kind of recognized like this is a win-win-win all around. Yeah, we launched it this past year, and I can share a little bit in the lessons learned about that. And as I shared earlier, a high priority of this program was ensuring that we had an intern. And we have a partnership with the Ontario Institute of Studies in Education at the University of Toronto, who has a internship course with the Masters of Education program, which is typically 120 hours over 12 weeks. And so we have hired an intern into this role every year in the summer, and they have been such a valuable part of us building all of these each year's kind of goals. And developing the asynchronous content. It's been remarkable to have folks who have been former teachers who are doing their masters, new grads who are really passionate about e-learning and being able to create content that is engaging for their peers. And so, yeah, being able to really like ensure that the internship is not just about experience of getting into education and getting into higher education, but also around what are the skill sets for that intern that they both want to develop or that they are already bringing to the opportunity. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this was, you could just kind of click through everything here. Thank you. So prior to the pandemic, the International Education Center was one of our partners. And they were ones who ran an activity, and it was called Bafa Bafa. I can't technically talk about what the program is because I have participated in it, but I wouldn't be able to do a great sales pitch. It's a wonderful activity and it was really enjoyable. But a lot of it involved a lot of resources. They brought out kind of their whole team to help lead it, acknowledging that we're talking about in the student housing department. They hire a high number of student staff. I think they're at like 80 or 90. The Center for Student Engagement has over 100, and the International Education Center, I think, hires 30 to 40 each year. So we're talking about a lot of people and a very engaging activity that required a lot of reflection and participation and being able to ensure that the scheduling of that worked. And so during COVID, they started to shift this entire kind of activity and framework to think about themselves without us ever talking to them about Nexus, about how could they actually work on developing modules to explain basic intercultural frameworks and be able to have space so that people could still interact and engage, but they were getting foundational knowledge before participating in an activity that required them to have that base level knowledge ahead of time. And this is exactly what we were trying to do with Nexus. We were trying to say, we acknowledge that every single student that's coming in to work for any of these three departments are coming with a plethora of life experiences, past trainings, past job opportunities, past development. And we don't want to assume that anyone is kind of at a certain level. We want to make sure that everybody has the basic level of knowledge so that they can keep building on that. And so, as I shared, the International Education Center had kind of been having the same conversations in their department. And they actually introduced the Intercultural Development Inventory, which allowed for students to participate in that inventory, discover kind of where they fall on that spectrum that exists with IDI. And then they could have online debriefs that took place kind of after so that they could figure out kind of where they need to shift perspective or where they can learn and grow, which was really cool. And then so they were able to build all this and launch all this within the Nexus first year. And then they also created a 2.0, which allowed them to build on that intercultural framework and go into more advanced levels. And then be able to kind of talk about real world collaborations that exist so that students could reflect on how they've actually been doing jobs in the past and where that where their real world experiences kind of play out in understanding intercultural development, which was really neat. This complemented the first module, and then they were able to actually track who was completing the IDI, who was completing all of their training. So it gave them really, really good data. And that's a big part of kind of that. I often think of reciprocity when I think of partnerships, and I work in kind of a community engagement lens. So that's really important for me. And I ensure that when I'm building partnerships on campus, I think about that too. And for a lot of those folks, really good data and being able to articulate how they're connecting with students has been very valuable. So being able to give them data around numbers, so like 300 plus students being able to engage in this content, but then kind of ongoing what sort of feedback they're providing, what's the learning that they're actually experiencing because of participation in this. And it's been so rich and so valuable. So that's a good reminder to me that I need to send this year's feedback to our partners, which is wonderful. It seems like this first semester has just flown by. So excited to be able to share some of that content with those partners as a celebration of all the hard work that they did in creating this content alongside us. Next slide, please. So continuous improvement, being very transparent that everything doesn't always go perfectly. So one of the areas that we recognized was ensuring that we give partners as much notice as possible. And I use the example of when we were reaching out to partners for 2.0, we had originally been told that us reaching out in kind of January, February was too early. That year we piloted having an intern that was in the winter. And so I was like, yeah, let's get ahead of this. Let's kind of have the fact that our partners are around and maybe not on vacation in the summer, they'd be able to work with all these on-campus partners in the winter. All those partners were like, how could I possibly think of August training in January? It's snowing. There's too much going on. We're running programs, we're running services, like no chance. But then on the flip side, we then waited a little bit too long with a lot of partners kind of going, okay, we won't reach out till like June, July. We don't want to bother you. We know that budget year end is in April, kind of overthinking when it was that we would connect with partners. And some of the partners really did share with us, ooh, that's a little too late. Now I'm kind of stressed. This is too much. So we've, over the years, figured out that having our intern here in the spring, summer, them being able to do some of the reviews and trainings themselves to kind of get prepared in May, and then reaching out to those partners before the intern even starts, just to say, hey, it's a new year. This is the strategy for this year. And so thinking back to the kind of 3-year strategy, I forgot to share that this is kind of a cyclical strategy. So we're going into year 4, which will mean that we will review the 1.0 session. So this would be where I would reach out to those partners in April and just share, hey, this year we're doing the 1.0 again. We're going to have an intern starting in May, and looking forward to reaching out in early May to start those conversations around development of your content. But then we leave the content as it is until that review happens again. So the 1.0 hasn't been looked at since 2022, which we're very excited to go back and dig into the assessment. What did students tell us? What would the partners now say? Kind of conversations have evolved, which is really cool. And then next year we'll be reviewing 2.0, and then the third year we'll be reviewing that PD. Other lessons learned was that we want this information to complement the in-person sessions. When it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion, intercultural development, really any of our partner sessions, we know that these topics are lifelong. You're constantly learning about these topics. You're constantly growing in your own experiences, your own learning, unlearning, reflection, and evolution of thought. And so we want to make sure that everybody is aware that doing asynchronous content like this does not uh, kind of leave you avoiding doing any sort of additional training or in-person sessions that would need to complement that knowledge. And that's a big piece of getting the buy-in from our partners. There was some hesitation in year 1, again, being transparent, that they were like, I don't think I can take a 4-hour workshop that I've done for many, many years and turn it into one asynchronous thing. How do you know that students are learning that? How do you know that that the information is actually going to translate, etc. And so the buy-in is that we know that for certain departments, certain timings, what those students are going to actually be working on and running, it matters that they do have additional trainings as needed. So I often use the example of the fact that in our office, we have a number of programs that partner with the community and work with youth that are coming onto campus. Those students are actually getting trained by those community partners about their requirements around engaging with youth on behalf of that organization. And so that is a complement to the conversations that are happening in training because it's additional to what we've shared. And things that they should consider because of the job that they are doing that's very, very niche to something that happens in the Center for Student Engagement that may not happen in the International Education Center or Student Housing and Residence Life. As I shared before, being able to share assessment with campus partners has been a big one. At first, we were kind of like, all we're really assessing is if the students gained kind of the knowledge, they have a space to ask any questions that we can follow up with, and then also any feedback that they have about the session. And so at first we were kind of like, oh, like we'll just tell those partners the information once we're actually reviewing the modules for kind of 2.5 years from now. But our partners were kind of like, actually, I'd be curious now. I'm eager to hear what the students are saying because they shared with me that sometimes for them, this is actually a pilot for them to build additional content, both for students, but also a larger audience that exists. So I use the example of last year when we did the 2.0 returner stream with the equity, diversity, and inclusion team. They were actually developing their own separate module for all of UTM. And so they were kind of building the session based on what they were sharing with students. So it was really neat to kind of be a part of those discussions, and acknowledge that this Nexus asynchronous methodology for student development and student learning was being applied to other areas. And we are happy to be able to ensure, and the biggest piece kind of around that reciprocity as well was making sure that we also had the resources that were allocated to those partners. Again, not just saying to those partners, hey, we need a training module, you have to go do it, we need it by this date, this time. We were bringing in that intern to really say that they're going to be the ones who are responsible for kind of timelines and asking questions and ensuring that the content is clear. And then the ones to actually put it into the module, and make it make sense for a student audience. So that took that pressure off those campus partners. Their expertise was around the content itself and the learning outcomes that needed to happen. But yeah, we just kind of forgot along the way that assessment is important to share and is a privilege to be able to have access to student reflection and feedback. And so how can we share that with our campus partners? And then the last lesson learned was stick to your strategic plan. There was moments when we were eager to say to partners, you know what? We have a really great intern. Let's just build 2.0 now. Or, oh, the PD thing sounds so cool. Let's just launch that this year. It would be so neat to be able to showcase the fact that there's lots of things happening on campus. Every time we just like took a step back and we said, stick to the plan. We made this plan for a reason. It helped us with just, I guess, just not burning out, to be honest with you, because we only had to do the one thing that we were focused on doing. And I don't know about everyone else, but it feels like we're at a time where it's do more with less, and that keeps being more and more obvious in the realities of our work experience and the current state of higher education. And so, yes, it was appealing at times to kind of say, yay, we could just get this done. We have this amazing intern. But doing the 3 years, I mean, time flies. And 3 years somehow went by in a flash anyway. But it gave us all a chance to just breathe. It gave our partners a chance to just breathe. We're doing 1.0, the next year we're doing 2.0, and then we're just doing the PD one. It felt like everyone this summer doing the PD one was like, oh, this is lovely. We're just looking at the programs we're already running, and sharing those with you. And so I plan to ensure that that is a very important component of this, is that we need to stick to that strategic plan going forward. Again, it would be so easy to look at, okay, you built it over 3 years. Why don't we just review it every single year? But it's too much. And it forces you to do too much all at once. And this 3 year plan is giving us better data because now we have 3 cohorts of students who have done the new training stream. We have 3 cohorts of students who have done the returner stream. So that's going to give us richer data to say what are the changes that we actually want to make, where are the challenges where students didn't quite get the messaging, but we actually have 3 years of that versus, I don't know about everyone else, but I've experienced where we just kind of go, oh my gosh, students told us they didn't like this, let's change everything about it. And then the next year, the feedback is, oh, why didn't you do it this way? And you're like, that's the way we used to do it. Why did we change it? So we've really found that if you just slow down and give yourself 2, 3+ years of assessment, it's going to be even more rich data to tell you what you actually do want to change. Next slide, please. So next steps. So one of the areas that we are looking at is exploring additional asynchronous modules because we have those 4. But over the last few years, we've kind of just around tables or around all staff meetings, folks have kind of said, hey, why don't we do a module about X or Y? And we've, again, sticking to our strategic plan, said no new ones. But as we go into a new year and we're kind of launching 1.0 again, this is a great time for us to say, is there any additional core trainings that we feel are missing? Right now, we've been talking about universal design as an area. that everyone's kind of very interested in. And so a piece of that is also, can it be asynchronous? Can there be a module that's actually built? Who's the right partner on this? And why is that topic relevant to all students? And so those are kind of the main questions that we ask. But it's great to be able to say, yay, we're going into a new year, so we may add some new modules this year. Um, there have been questions and conversations about folks outside of student engagement asking, can we be a part of Nexus? It's been a bit of a challenge because we're acknowledging that one, we built this over 3 years, so it's not always easy to take content that was built for a specific group of student leaders and just say, yeah, yeah, it applies to any other department. That's not the easiest thing to do, but the reality is, again, collaboration is super important, especially when there's scarcity of resources, and there are challenges at all institutions involving that we want to be good and helpful colleagues. So if we have something that works, why not share it? So one of the areas that I jumped into before we could actually kind of review this plan was acknowledging that some of the modules are not things that were built exclusively for Nexus. So for example, the one that I shared about the equity, diversity, and inclusion, kind of building one that was on the side, that one's now available to everyone. So I said you could kind of start there. You could have that be your asynchronous module. The Sexual Violence and Prevention Center also has all the modules, and that was them doing that kind of during the pandemic before Nexus even launched. And so I've been very transparent about, yeah, you could probably start with the ones that exist, and then the building of new ones is an area where you'd want to put some resources into that. But start with what's accessible. Start with what's easy, so that you can kind of build something without us sharing content that may not fit with those students. And then I already said this, but sticking with our 3-year strategy, knowing that we're going into year 4, we really want to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves or try to do too much. And that co-creation is such a core part of this. We are working with a large number of partners on the campus. We're working with new interns who most of the time are new professionals, but some have been professionals who have been in different fields who want to come over to higher education. And so it's about co-creation, and I hope we all know that co-creation does take time when done well, and we need to kind of slow ourselves down to make sure that we're co-creating together and utilizing everyone's skills around that table. All right, so as I shared, and I'm more than open to questions and comments and feedback, and I'm realizing that I never brought myself a water, so I definitely need to take I need to stop talking break. But my kind of questions for folks to noodle on and to reflect on, as you're thinking about if you wanted to implement something like this on your campus, is what core trainings take place across multiple units. So having those conversations with folks, even if they title it something different, I often do find that we kind of are all trying to focus on student leader development in similar ways. So being able to just kind of get everyone around the table, whoever it is that you're trying to partner with, and just say, like, what are the names of your trainings that you offer? Or can you provide me with a training calendar so I can just see what it is you're doing, how many hours you're doing, who are the partners that you're working with. And then those are the moments where you can kind of go, wait a second, that's the same partner that I work. Oh my gosh, we all have the exact same partner. And that's kind of where this all started for us, was just being like, hey, our colleague, Nythala Baker, who works in the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion office, is constantly running around in August with us and at all these different training sessions. So what are we doing here? We got to fix this. And so then again, looking at who are those on-campus partners who are running at the same time frame as you. Again, you're in the same kind of, hey, we're asking the same thing at the exact same time. Maybe we can alleviate that. I think it's great that from the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of great takeaways. I mean, we could probably argue that work from home was lovely for however long that lasts in the future. But that us all realizing that we can actually do asynchronous content, I think was a huge aha moment for me, knowing that we just weren't used to that in the ways that it can still be very educational and engaging, and students can still get the information that you were hoping they got out of it, and all of our assessment tells us that. And so we need to kind of just keep acknowledging that and keep supporting ourselves and saying it's okay that even in this kind of post-pandemic context of saying we're going to do more in person and we're looking to go back to in person, we can still do things asynchronously, and that students actually really are used to kind of doing things in the virtual world, and so that works. And then ultimately, would you have access to funding a recent grad or an intern who's interested in the topic around student kind of affairs and services in Canada or student affairs and services in your department? Because the reason I share that, not just because they're so valuable and they provide that like being able to get the work done compared to everybody else who's kind of there's so much going on, we only have so much time. But it's also that when we're thinking about our field and the future of our field, and I'm very passionate about thinking about that. And I often say to interns, thank you for choosing kind of our field for your career. It means a lot to know that the future of our field is based on folks who want to be here. But it's up to us to help train folks and to ensure that they are getting access to the things that are kind of the norms within our jobs. And I often say hiring and training are those two areas. All of us are responsible for hiring and training students in some capacity. And so, how within internships and folks who are interested in this field can we expose them to opportunities to gain skill sets in those two areas? I think that is all for me. Yeah, I'm open to any comments, questions, or feedback that anyone would like to share. All right.
Right. Alicia, do you want to get a sip of water?
I don't even have any around me,
Oh.
unfortunately, but that's okay. I'll go eat my lunch after this and have a nice cool glass of water.
Alicia, there's a question in the chat and it says, it's not from me, it's from from someone else, but it says,
Yeah.
I'm curious about the Articulate software. Can you share why you found it to be an effective training tool rather than using UTM's LMS?
What is LMS, learning management software?
I
Yeah.
think so.
Okay. Yeah, so Articulate, the cool part about Articulate, I mean, at first I was interested in it because it was free. So it was fun to just like play around. But it actually did speak to and have software capabilities. I don't know how software is like build relationships. Not good with like robots and software relationships, but Articulate actually does talk to Quarkus, and Quarkus is our learning tool, and students are familiar with Quarkus as the ways that they engage in online learning. And so we're able to actually build Articulate that then goes into Quarkus. And so a lot of these sessions and modules were actually in Quarkus. And so it was just a tool of Articulate, just had the like ease of interns being able to build content that was just like flip this card to learn this definition, or like click on this to learn about that. And I have yet to find that in a U of T learning system that is that like engaging and easy for us to kind of change. But the actual trainings exist in Quarkus, and so Quarkus and that learning tool is still the main source of kind of how students are actually engaging. So it's kind of a bit of both worlds, I would assume. But I'm also open to always learning or hearing about new softwares, especially knowing that I have an intern who can devote a lot more time to just playing in those softwares. But yeah, I just find Articulate has, I think it's a free trial, which for me was like basically an entire intern's contract. So I was like, great, I will do this. But over the years, we have purchased it because we were finding that our professional team actually really loves to use Articulate. So it just made sense for us to use it. Great question.
How did you decide what sessions to do in it? So I'm assuming you still do some stuff in person. How did you decide to do what things to do asynchronously, and which things to, and did you build on some of the content when you're in person?
Good question. So where it started was a few different things. So it started kind of with that brainstorm of all of us saying, who's asking the same people to train? It also stemmed from leadership saying, the leadership of student engagement and the folks who are in student leadership roles under this umbrella, these are the areas that I would say is core training to all three departments. And then it was up to each department to kind of say, okay, in addition to that, what would be our core training? And so each department has kind of come up with other areas where it would be more kind of off the modules or just totally different streams that are separate from Nexus. But we really did stick Nexus to what is core for all three departments and every single student leader in these departments. And then yes, I know for sure that each department has kind of built on that learning, whether it's in August. I know that Student Housing and Residence Life still brings in the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office to acknowledge the fact that some of the training that's required for folks who are working in residence needs a lot more than just what's in Nexus. And so they do something in August still. I know that other departments do stuff in services later on in the year. So that's also kind of given us a chance to say, we don't all need this in August. Every student leader needs some information in August, but that building on that learning will happen for each department differently at different times. And I think a key piece of this review going into kind of a new year one will allow us to go back to leadership and say, are these the four modules we want to stick with? Is there any areas that we think needs improvement? Or do we need new modules? Is there an area that leadership or these departments are saying, no, 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 this topic needs to be for all three departments now?
Cool. And what's the name Nexus? Where does that come from?
For anyone who knows Chad Nuttall, that is a name he came up with.
Oh.
I think I have Googled it at times. I often think of travel because I have a Nexus card to be able to travel easily, so I think of that. But I forget, it's something about like going forward, Nexus. I don't know. It was a Chad decision to be like, I'm gonna call it Nexus. I was like, okie dokie, I will lean into that. A connection that a connection or series of connections linking two or more things. So I guess that
Very
makes
good.
sense.
Yeah,
Connecting kind of things that were all separate are now kind of streamlined together.
very
Should
good.
remember that for the future since I'm representing this
Put a
next.
slide, put in a slide for it. And sorry, I mucked up your slides. I
Oh,
got it.
you're
I got
good.
overly excited.
Next slide, let's go. Any other questions or comments that folks want to share?
I can see that there's so much intentionality in the program, and I think it's beautiful because I muted my camera, but like there were so many times I was like, yes, yes, smiling and like I get it. Like we all ask students to do things, we all ask our partners to do everything. And so the idea behind the intentionality of who you're connecting with and then sticking to that plan, and also when people ask to be involved doesn't make sense. I think it's really neat. And I wrote down so many people that, I ask or that our colleagues ask and that they then ask us in return. I'm like, there is a better system, and you have sort of tapped into that. So I appreciate learning about that, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't have a question, but I do have a comment just to say this gives me some pieces to think about. We have a training for student event risk management, and it's not a comprehensive training program, kind of like the one that you're talking about, but it looks at risk management for student organizations. And there's information from different departments across campus, but the scale is a little bit different. But we have so far, we've had over 700 students complete it this term, but we just launched it in an online format. And one of the discussions we were talking about was like, do we want students to be completing the same one year over year? And what does that look like? And so I think seeing your like 1.0, 2.0 model just kind of gives me some pieces to think about. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and I think that was the exact same conversation we are having of like, we do need them to do something every year. Is it the same? And sometimes it's yes. Like we have acknowledged that sometimes the feedback when students have been like, oh my gosh, the content's the same. We've said it's been a year. And sometimes when you're in a job, you got to do a refresh in a year, and it's about reframing it for yourself, maybe listening to the content in a different way, reflecting on it a different way. So sometimes it's okay to say like, no, no, it's it's a refresh, and a year is a long time. A lot can happen in that year, but then it has also been nice. And even with those modules, at first the partners are kind of like, do I have to do a recap? Do I not have to do a recap? And we're like, I don't know. Like, what do you think? And over time, we're just like, yeah, a little recap doesn't hurt. Like, just a quick, like, as you may remember, or like, here's a little quiz, like, just to check your knowledge. And I forgot to share that one of our biggest flaws was that we cousin Corcus, it was actually really funny because it was like a win-loss, but our intern figured out that in Corcus, she could figure out how once they've done 1.0, they would have access to 2.0. So we're like, okay, perfect. This takes away all the like manual labor of figuring it out. That year one, a lot of students were like, oh my God, there's another module. I'll just do that. So we had a ton of students do 2 modules, and we're like, all right, you just learned lots of things this year. This is lovely. But we realized that like we need to just explain that better because they were almost too eager to learn more, and that's why we launched that PD part. And I loved that PD part because that was some of the feedback students were giving us, like, oh my gosh, this Indigenous intercultural conversation was so interesting. I had no idea. Where can I learn more? I want to do more. Like, what is that office running, etc. And then in turn, that office is running programs where they're like, oh my gosh, we're not getting enough students, or the timing is not working for students. Like, how could we improve? So being able to actually feed students into your learning journey is so personal. And yes, professionally, we're telling you have to learn some of this content, but we also want you to figure out which are the areas where you're feeling a little stuck and you want to learn more, or where are the areas where you get really fired up to learn. Like, that's the whole point of higher education, is just to feel that love for learning. So how can we expose students to the fact that yes, this job requires you to learn, but maybe there's areas where you want to develop your learning in a different area. And so that's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it. And I will say, to be transparent, and I see someone else off camera, but when I first ever reached out to our campus partners, I was like, stay with me. I know I'm asking for a massive shift from what we've done. I was like, the short-term goal is yes, we're doing asynchronous, and I know that that is a huge change from what we've done from when you used to be in front of students for 3 hours and get to like see the feedback as you go. But I was like, this is the vision. We have 3 years to truly ensure that students are learning about your department, learning about the topics and like the most important learnings that you want them to have. But then this PD stream will allow you to have those students hopefully come out to your programs and keep learning with you. And so it was kind of, I joke, it was like my Rumpelstiltskin, like, I will promise, I don't have children, but my firstborn, that yes, over 3 years, I will make sure that you still get that chance to connect with students. I'm not taking that away from you. So that was my like, just give this a chance. And I'm hopeful and I feel very positive that all the partners have kind of gone along this journey with us, and we've made sure that it's a journey together. We're not just dictating this to partners that they have to do this. We want to do this together.
Thank you so much for this. This has been so helpful. And some of these topics are literally what we just talked about with our team last week. So very applicable. I'm joining from the University of Victoria. We just launched a new first year mentorship program for all first year undergrad students. And so we have approximately 400 mentors and 400 mentees in the program. And the training piece was like a huge undertaking in August that we just had to complete within 3 weeks. So it was like very much like, we'll just put something out there in the world and then we will evaluate and see where that goes. But I so appreciate that, of like, what can you build on? What do you want the students to retake, and maybe remind them of some of the things that you wanted them to learn in the first place? And then maybe what are things that they're very passionate about, and like now you make available another training piece that they can unlock and sort of dive in a little bit deeper. And I did have a question about completion. Like, how do you track completion of the program? For us, we're just doing it within like our little team, but I'm assuming that maybe some partners potentially need different information, or yeah. So just was wondering about that piece. And then also maybe like for us, it was very hard to figure out like how long will this training take for students? And then some people literally said, I completed the training, but we have a mechanism where we know you didn't complete the training. And so trying to figure out like yeah, how to like build in that accountability and build in like these are really important things that we want you to know. So please finish every single piece of this. And if there's like we have built in sort of questions in between that are very easy, but they're just sort of tracking that someone's going through the training. But I feel like there's a lot of room for growth and improvement within that. And so yeah, I was just wondering what that looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I may have mashed those questions into one, so I apologize if I'm forgetting the first question. But in terms of tracking, so luckily the perk of Quarkus is that it is like a course system, LMS, I think is what Quarkus is considered. But yeah, so what I do within that is ensure that those individual representatives from each department is responsible for their own tracking. So they have their master list, and then they're able to pull down every single person who's done that last module. Like there's always like a last reflection piece that's like at the end that they only have access to once they get through. And then they can compare that. And the reason we do it that way and not a master list, and this was a lesson learned, so I will add it to my slides for the future, is that again, there was folks who were in multiple departments. So if you all of a sudden were like, oh my gosh, they didn't do it, it's like, who's communicating that, etc. So it was easier for us to say, like, you're responsible for your own trainings, you're figuring out what sessions they came to, and ultimately you're deciding who has completed training to pay them for that training. So that's kind of a piece of that is you're allocating that. And that was your other question. So thanks for framing them in that way. It our language, and it's not perfect by any means, but we've talked about contractual obligations and the fact that these trainings are all a part of the contract that they signed. We talk about the fact that we are paying them for this training and therefore they should be taking the time that we've allocated to it. And then we also talk about that it's their responsibility to know this information. So if they need to go and do it 10 times at 10 times the speed because that's the way they learn, have at her. You can learn this as many times as you want, but it's your responsibility to acknowledge when the content is not something that you're engaging with. So following up with your supervisor, hey, I tried to do this module, I'm getting really confused. Can we talk about it? Is okay compared to I zipped through it as fast as humanly possible, told you what you wanted to know, and have moved on. And then I had another thought around that. I'm blanking on what it was. Something around paying. Oh, the number of hours. So yes, that's a great question. I think we have always said that the total amount that the modules would take is 6 hours. And each year, the first thing I have the interns do is do the training. I say, hey, this is what you're working on this year. You're going to do 1.0, track your timing. You're going to do 2.0, track your timing. And then I just kind of review it. And each year it's been around the same number, give or take 10 minutes. So that just kind of validates. I'm like, okay, that's how long it takes a student who's genuinely coming into it being like, I need to learn this because I'm about to work on it. But again, we know that each person, I think ourselves included, some trainings you go a little faster, some trainings you go a little slower. So it's learning on your own terms, but we do say it as many times as humanly possible that like we are allocating and paying you for 6 hours. So spend those 6 hours however you see fit to engage in that content.
Thanks, Alicia.
Yeah,
Give
thanks.
another minute, Haley, for any other questions.
Yes, no, this is perfect.
It's been fun. Now I have like a report to write that I just kept like changing my to-do list, being like, yeah, I'll get to it. My goal is by the 30th. And now I'm like, okay, maybe I'll actually do that tomorrow morning because now I'm excited again about what I'm trying to say. So thank you
You're
all
jazzed up.
for listening to me and having me here today for this conference. It's been really enjoyable. So yeah, and feel free to reach out. I can put my email in the chat, or you can just like Google me, probably would work. And happy to share. I know that in the past folks have said like, would love to just see it. I don't typically provide people with access because it throws off our data. Sometimes people are like, oh, can you just let me like do the course? I don't do that, but I'm happy to jump on a call and just kind of show you what it looks like. But it's Quarkus, it's kind of boring, but the modules and Articulate is definitely a cool software, and cool that it's free for a little while, so you can play around with it, which is great. Free is good.
Yes. Yes, I'm definitely gonna look into that because Nawasha, we also use Canvas. So I'm interested to know what Articulate can do in terms of making it engaging that Canvas can't. I'm like you, Alicia, I don't know anything about robots or technology or anything about learning management system, but there's someone on campus that does that can help. So I agree. I'm in the same boat as you two. I'm gonna do some investigative work because I think this is really neat. And that's what students want, right? Like they don't really want to be talked at, they want to learn through engaging. And we know that's what they need. So how can we help them do that? Yeah, this was beautiful and lovely. And again, thank you for presenting at Caucus. And then thank you for coming here. For those of us that weren't able to come to Caucus or see your session, this has been very inspiring, as we have all said. And it's thank you for sort of showcasing and explaining how you did it and the steps that you took to get here. It was nice to follow along and to really understand it so that we might be able to do something on our own campuses.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yes.